Coaches, we're out here to bust some myths. What is ecological dynamics? What is the constraints-led approach? How do you bring this into your coaching? Do you have to chuck everything out that you've been doing before so that you can adopt these new approaches? Or can you be practical and merge these together? It's episode 35 of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast. Special guest Liam Jefferson, who's been on a journey himself from traditional approaches to coaching through to games-based approaches, then the CLA, and now where is he now? He's been through it all. That's why we've got Liam on. I've got my usual colleague here, Mark, who's going to ping back some thoughts and reflections. So welcome, Mark, and welcome, Liam.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Avid listener of the pod, so I'm excited and honoured to have the chance to chop it up with you guys for the next hour or so.
Oh, Liam, have you got a favourite episode? That'll put you on the spot.
Oh, good question. I think the end of season one, like the end of year one that you guys did, where you were just reviewing across, was great for me because there were so many pockets and learning that I've taken throughout the year that it was like a nice recap. I remember you guys talking about
great.
Covert challenge, covert like hot review and all that sort of stuff. So it was great.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Liam. You and my cat and Mark's dogs, you're our top 3 listeners, I think, so far. So yeah, much appreciated. For anyone listening who is a big listener, if you want to be a guest and you've got something interesting to say, just drop us a line. But Liam, let's connect your experience to the experience of our listeners, because there's a lot of people confused out there. Should I be just chucking out the baby with the bathwater and going all in on the CLA? What even is a constraint anyway? Or should I stick with drills? Or should I be playing games? Should I be opposed? Or should I feel guilty if I do an unopposed activity? in my coaching, am I being a dinosaur by doing that? So can you kick us off? Tell us about the journey you've been on as a coach as you've explored different methodologies.
Yeah, I mean, we could be here for an hour just on this one, so I'll try and keep it as succinct as I can do. I've been coaching now for coming up to 15 years. Studied coaching at university, and I say studied coaching at university. This was a while back now at Sheffield Hallam, and then graduated and moved into the world of work. So I worked full-time for various different organizations whilst coaching, so could never really go 2 feet in, working at Loughborough University and the Youth Sport Trust and organisations like that, where I was in the sport space but not necessarily coaching as much. And then a few years ago had the chance to really go all in and full time in coaching. And I would say my coaching practice has kind of changed as I've been able to go all in and full time in coaching. Not that that's going to be a limiter to anybody else, but that's played a big part in my journey. And I think the very start, as you graduate and you go into the world of coaching as a 21, 22-year-old coach, you think you have all of the answers and you know everything, and you have this ideal of what coaching looks like. And I was very much definitely in that space. So it was very traditional based. There would be a lot of, I would say, on-air practice. There was a lot of, with myself being a basketball coach, very set heavy and set repetitive practice, where now I would say it looked a lot like synchronized swimming, where everybody was perfectly running to the right space and doing the right thing in the right moment. And I had a chance to work at Loughborough University with a coach called Mark Jarram, and coached with Mark there, who has worked with Alan with national teams, and both of you will probably know Mark in some shape or form. And Mark had started to move towards a games-based approach, and being around that environment as I was working with him, I'd started to explore that a little bit more. But it was actually by pure happenstance and chance that I moved into the CLA space. So whilst working with Mark at Loughborough, we'd started to explore how we want to play more fast within the game of basketball. So how do we get up and down the floor faster? And he set me a task to explore Mike Neighbors, who was the head coach at Arkansas, and played with this transition idea that they had a racker and a dragon, and they had to play up the street and across the street, and there was all this terminology attached to it. And then that naturally led me to Brent Tipton, who was coaching the two-side transition break. And from there, I'd started then to think about, well, if we played that way and we played fast, we'd have to play with conceptual offense, and we would have to allow the players more autonomy, and we would have to give them the opportunity to not read and react, but perceive what was happening in front of them and play out of that. And that then led me to Alex Sarama and a lot of the work that he was doing with small-sided games and triggers and concepts. And then I had an opportunity to go full-time and work with Alex at the London Lions. And so as my kind of own coaching journey has progressed, the approaches that I've taken along the way has gone from what I would call a very traditional approach, and I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. I think that's the terminology that people now attach to it, to a games-based approach to the CLA. And now that I'm at Oakland's and the head coach at Oakland's Wolves, I have my own direction over the program and what we think best practice looks like, that I'm kind of taking elements and aspects of each of those different stops and applying it in my own environment now.
So question, Liam, where's been if you're going through these stages, if we call them out, I know it's not, you stop one and start another, there's an organic process, but where has there been, this makes sense, I'm changing to this, and there was an excitement or an enthusiasm? And the other side of the coin, where has there been a point where you've gone, this isn't working, I need to review what I'm doing?
Yeah, I think as I look back on it in hindsight now, the first 5 or so years of my coaching career, I was delivering the same year of coaching over and over again. And I've got 1 year of coaching experience that I delivered 5 times because I thought that's what perfect coaching looked like. And I knew that that wasn't right as kind of started to move into that games-based space, working with Mark. And he was a huge, avid believer that we should play as much as possible in practice because that's what looks like the game. I think that the time that I spent with Alex, and I'll be very open, I'm not sure if I've said this to him, when I first went to London Lions, I was really skeptical of the CLA because the language was really daunting. I'm not academically driven, and you hear some of these words like an affordance and a rate limiter and action capability, and you think, holy crap, like what do these things mean? And so I was skeptical, and some of the use of language was quite far out there as well. But when you actually get into that environment and you start leading from a CLA perspective and you start utilizing constraints, I think I saw so much more growth amongst the players, and I saw a level of understanding change. And the great thing for me, especially within an environment where you're utilizing the CLA and small-sided games, there's so much more fun in that environment as well. That I think the first few weeks that I was at London and coaching in that way, that was that aha moment for me. I was like, there's so much here in this environment that I can take and apply in my own practice. And I think the best way to describe it now is, and I've heard you guys speak a lot about having a toolbox or a toolkit. I think if I view coaching my team as building a house, the CLA is my toolbox. That's the thing that does the heavy lifting in my environment. We'll play a lot of small-sided games. We'll use a lot of constraints. But then my tool belt are all the other interventions and things that I have that if I'm building this house and I want to drill a hole and put a screw in, I then have to get the screwdriver just to tighten it up and make sure that it's not going to fall apart. And for me, that's the way that I've now started to view my coaching practice. Is the CLA does the heavy lifting, but that doesn't mean that then I'm not utilizing some other elements of my own coaching practice to help get to that end goal.
And where did you get to where that was a comfy decision? That you go, I can have both, it's fine.
It's probably been this year, to be honest with you, Mark. I think I've spent some time talking to Alan about it. So through Movement, I'm on the Movement membership and have some time to talk with Alan, because I think there's this perception that if you are a CLA coach, you are out there and you're really at the extreme of you only do small-sided games, you're only coaching with that. And I was really grappling with that because as an identity, I didn't feel quite comfortable with, if people were to introduce me, they say, oh, this is Liam, and Liam's a CLA coach. And it almost diminished the other elements of coaching that you have within the space. So it's probably, within the last 6 to 12 months that I've actually become a little bit more comfortable to know that I can still use other elements within my own environment, because that's the thing that the players need most.
100%.
Expression that springs to mind here is strong opinions lightly held. I think that fits where our society is at the moment. Like it's where we should be it's okay to have strong opinions, but holding them lightly and being willing to change them is the critical bit. And sometimes I wonder if some coaches get their identity wrapped up in methodology. Like you said, I'm a CLA coach, or I'm a up tempo coach, or I'm a defense first coach. I mean, all these things are, it's great to have principles, but they become a sort of noose around your neck if you repeat them too often, and you become known for that. And then you've got some identity issues, and now it becomes quite hard to change because somehow that methodology has connected to your identity. And it sounds like you were maybe on the verge of that, and then started to see, oh, well, actually, there's some, I don't want to be pigeonholed in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that because of how the CLA can be perceived, we see a lot of it now on social media, and it feels like it's the in vogue topic within coaching, and especially in all of the areas that I see, that you do have to be all the way at that extreme. And for me, that's just not true in the environment. It doesn't mean that I can't then help to, ultimately within the CLA, we want the players to be able to perceive a certain affordance, and we'll use the constraints to be able to get to that point. But there are other tools within my tool belt to help me to guide them sometimes to that affordance. It doesn't all have to be self-discovery, and it doesn't all have to be self-mastery. And that's definitely being a shift in, like you said, Simon, in my identity as a coach, is having comfort that I can do that within that space and still utilize the CLA and everything that comes with it in my environment.
I guess when they train fighter pilots, they don't just use CLA, do they? I guess.
Yeah, knowing which buttons to push is probably an underrated skill in flying a fighter jet. Yeah. So tell us about like some details here. If I was to come into your practice, I observed your practice, on Monday morning. First of all, tell us, like, who would I be observing? So give us some context of the athletes, and then what would you want me to notice about that practice?
Yeah, so I think that you would see two different types of groups. So at Oakland, we have an academy team, which is 16 to 19. So competing in the top level of academy basketball in England. And then we also have a men's team as well. And I think in either environment, you would see something slightly different. If I'm being honest and transparent, I think you would see a little bit more games-based approach in the men's environment because we have less contact time with them. We only have 2 training sessions a week, whereas our academy are every day, Monday to Friday. So you would see a little bit more small-sided games, and also with just the stage that they're at in their own development, they need to naturally learn more than our senior men's players who are competing at a semi-professional level. I think you would see a quick pace to everything that we're doing in practice. Nothing typically goes for longer than 15, 20 minutes in any sort of activity that we're doing, that we're moving between. I think some coaches would also be surprised with how non-linear a practice is. So it's not like we're introducing something and building up onto the next theme and sticking with something and moving through a practice. So we wouldn't, say, teach a pick and roll coverage and go from 2-on-2 to 3-on-3 to 5-on-5 and progress through. I also think you would see a lot of opportunities for players to engage with each other and coaches in that environment to help shape what some of that looks like. And I come back to it. I would hope that even though we're talking about at the elite level, that you would see a lot of joy in that environment as well. Because for me, that's one of my core coaching values anyway. No one gets involved in sport because they don't enjoy it and they don't want to have fun from it. And that's down to me to create that in the environment as well.
So Liam, question now, I'm a listener head on now. When you went into that environment at Oakland, when you first started, were they already synced to how you would coach? And I'm coming from an athlete's experience point of view. So we know often athletes have comfort zone habits. They're always told the answer. So therefore, if you ask them, they're just going to look at you blank because they know coach is going to tell me the answer. And actually, if you're asking me a question, I'm uncomfortable with that. Just tell me what you want me to do. As an example, so when you went into Oakland or anywhere else, were they quite close to how you wanted to coach, or did you recognise it was a bit more difficult with these than it was with these to actually get to the point where they go, oh, I get it now?
Yeah, it was a challenge. It was a real challenge because I think you have to explain to the players the why and to give them the context as to why are we doing that, and especially with our men's players because they have almost a bit of survivorship bias. Some of our men's players are early 30s, so they've been in basketball for 15 to 20 years from a kid all the way through. And all of a sudden I'm coming in and the environment looks very different. We're not doing on-air activities. And so explaining the why and helping them to understand that we actually want to create chaos in our environment because that's what the game looks like. We don't want to be seeking perfection in everything that we're doing. And if you do struggle in a moment, I'm not going to stop it and give you the answer. I want you to self-explore. I want you to problem solve. I want you as teammates to get together and find some of those. That was a challenge, and that took a little bit of time to be able to change that. And oftentimes, when speaking with other coaches, I think that's one of the things that puts people off. They start to feel some or see some resistance, or they see the mess in the environment and immediately go, this isn't right. I've got to go back to what I know and what has worked for me. And the biggest bit of advice I could give anyone is to stick through it in that moment, because that's what the game looks like as well. So when you get into that moment where the ball goes up, I get 5 timeouts a game. I can't stop it every moment and correct. And actually, I want to encourage that mess and I want to encourage that chaos, and having to help the players understand that. It took time. It took a good few months before we got to a point where they were truly bought in and understand the purpose of why we were doing it the way that we were doing it.
Did you get a few players that you saw the light bulb go off long before the others and they started to champion what you're doing? Was there any little moments when you're going, these guys are starting to connect now and support you?
Yeah, I think you see a lot of it within player development, because in our player development sessions, that's where we are really full CLA, and we will present activities that get players to those moments. And there's a couple where players have come up with solutions that I haven't taught. So something as simple as playing 1-on-2, where an offensive player has the ball on the back of the defender and an opportunity to play and go. I remember very vividly that we did that. The player rotated and a player got to a Euro step and finished. So they evaded the help defender to get to a finish. Something that I'd never taught them and that player had never done before. And you could see the moment that, like, just the smile on their face when they realized what they'd done and what they'd come to as a solution to that situation, that then the penny almost drops a little bit. And we've had a lot of that within player development, because I think that's where, in those player development sessions, players see growth quickly with the CLA and then can buy in a little bit more.
Yeah. It's one of the things that we spoke about on earlier episodes, but that element of when you're introducing this is spot your ninjas, the high players of influence that can sabotage your champion, and do a little bit more work with them to get them to see the value, give them a bit more extra responsibility. So, it's almost going, I'm doing a bit of extra investment here because I know if you guys start getting it, it's going to make it so much easier for everyone else. Did you have any of those ninjas in your teams where you're going, this is a high influencer person, I hope they connect to this pretty quick?
Yeah, especially within that men's group, because this year is the first year that we've quite heavily invested in our men's team. So we've brought players in with the purpose of moving up through the leagues as quickly as we possibly can do. But that means bringing in a higher level player that is very quite set in their ways.
Yeah.
So I had to identify who were the key influencers and carried the most weight. And typically it's not your best players either.
Yeah.
Typically it's those that may have had a little bit more time in the game, have played at a higher level and naturally carry more respect within the group. And I try not to use the term leadership group, but we have a committee as such that we go to of players, and getting them on board early was the key, because then others have kind of followed suit as we've gone throughout the season.
Hey, Liam, can I circle back to something you talked about earlier when you were describing your practice and you said it'd be non-linear? So I was brought up on the concept of progressions. So you mentioned pick and roll, so just a tactical concept. Yeah, I would do that in 2-on-2, then I go to 3-on-3, and then I might move the 3-on-3 from the top to the corner. I might go transition. I might play 4-on-4. I might put in a constraint in 4-on-4. You gotta have a pick and roll before you can shoot, or something like that. Then we go into 5-on-5. So I was very much brought up on progressions, and I've seen it work for me as a coach. I'm sure there's a lot of coaches listening that use progressions in that way. So that's the jump from small-sided games to CLA for me, where small-sided games can be within a progression. That's what I used to do. CLA would adopt a non-linear approach. So can you just double-click on that non-linear approach? Like, why are you doing that? Convince me that I should do that rather than a progression.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Simon. I think for me, I want to try and create as much variability in our environment as possible. So I don't want my environment to feel not boring or stale or repetitive, but I want the players to have to problem solve in one activity and then quickly move to the next. Because again, that for me is what the game looks like. So I'll try to create as much variability in our environment as we possibly can do. For me, I think it, and this is personal philosophy and belief on it, I think it can become very repetitive if we're just building from, even within small-sided games, from one activity to the next with one specific topic. And that's not to say that within a practice we couldn't go back to a topic, but typically if we're teaching something, we might move on to a different activity and then circle back to it later in that practice. And in most practices, we would never have more than 3 key themes that we would be working on anyway. So if you think typically we have an hour and a half, 2-hour practice, and no activity is going for longer than 15, 20 minutes, you're going to get multiple touch points on one of those 3 topics within our practice environment anyway. But personally, I like the variability that we're able to create by bouncing around, because again, that for me is what the game looks like, and I want to try and stimulate and create that as much as possible.
Yeah, I guess athletes can predict, can't they, Mark? If you'd use a progression, and by the time I get to 4-on-4 and we're working on the same tactical concept, it is more complex because there's more people involved, but they are able to predict some elements of that environment because they've just been doing it in a smaller format.
Well, also, don't forget, if we're looking at working on going through these linear stages, humans don't learn that way anyway, in the fact of it might be something you have if we call it a breakout, we're seeing something in the game, we're seeing there's a trend of a barrier, we identify the source, we put in an intervention, and then we're saying to the athletes, let us know when you're ready. Yeah, we got it now, it makes sense. Let's go whack straight back in the game. We don't have to go, right, let's go to this, and this, because we don't know. We can plan that way, but the reality is humans don't need those steps to be successful in the game. The game will tell us if it's been successful or not. And yeah, we can add pressure in the game. But I think that's where, if you look at, I know I'm simplifying it a little bit, but if we look at non-linear, the game's your baseline. So yeah, you might make it a bit bigger, smaller, you might take a player out, but the game is. So if you're going, right, we've worked on this, I think we've got a trigger now or an understanding, or yeah, okay, well, let's pop it in the game and see. Now you can load the pressure, but the game will be your baseline. So then you don't need to go, well, before I check in the game, let's just move to this stage and this stage. And the players might go, just let's play. We're ready.
Yeah, my experience has been I do that progression. It all looks, I'm like, oh, they're getting it, 4-on-4. Then you play 5-on-5, and as soon as I take any constraints off, oh, now they're not getting it. Yeah. Or I have an experience where I'll introduce a tactical concept or a set play or something like that over a couple of weeks, or a principle of play even, and for 2 weeks we'll get better at it. But the thing I did 3 weeks ago, we're now worse at. That's what it does. That drives me nuts, because you think you're building all the time, but I forget about athletes forgetting.
Just on that, Simon, the especially because I hear that a lot with going from some of the small-sided games to then playing 5-on-5, and all of a sudden it feels like players have just forgot it. Typically, we wouldn't necessarily constrain, but one of the constraints that we could use is the scoring system to be able to shift attention back to that area that we've just looked on. So if we're trying to get players to be able to perceive a certain affordance, and again within the language, that's literally just an opportunity for action. So if it is, I don't know, take an example where on the pick and roll we're not seeing the pocket pass to the roller. Well, actually, when we're in that 5-on-5 situation, it could be worth double points if you score out of that situation. Or we like to have the golden snitch from Harry Potter, where actually if you score out of that, the game's done and we move on to the next activity within that. And for me, that just helps to shift players' attention back to that point, even though we're in 5-on-5 in that situation. So it's gameplay, but the constraint is I still want you to look for that affordance when we're playing out of pick and roll. So double points might help. The golden snitch is a great one, especially with younger kids, although the younger kids now don't know what Harry Potter is, which makes me feel really old. So I'm hoping this new series will then shift everybody back to being able to use it in my coaching practice for another 10 years or so. But they then hunt that affordance. They then hunt for that opportunity for action. And when it's an immediate win as well, the feeling of, all right, great, we won because we found that, I find that really powerful in our environment.
A little amusing thing, then, a more of a valued thing. I used to use Star Trek, the original Jean-Luc Picard, not the original, but they had the Borg, and the Borg, where they just adapt. You do something at them, within a few seconds, they'd work it out, and they'd just keep going. And that used to connect with people. And then as the years went, I'd say it, and I just had these blank faces going, what? So yeah, I haven't seen Harry Potter either, by the way, so I wouldn't be any good at that either. But whatever the current, I do apologise, everyone. And going back to the serious point, is one of the things that every coach needs to understand, an athlete, is that as soon as you put some and many athletes into a game, they'll be in game mode. All it's about who scores, who doesn't. So you've given some great examples there of how we can put more focus on that for success. And that other element is when you're doing the hot one-to-ones where you pull someone off for 10, 20 seconds, you go and review, and we're asking of you what we've pre-agreed success is. So that's that, whether it's seeking an opportunity to make that connection, the transfer into the game. But then if we do a timeout, if it's 30-second timeout, we're saying, okay, review what success was. And they're reviewing how are we doing with integrating that or whatever language that you've pre-agreed. So at least then there's a connection to not reviewing the game, not getting caught and we're in a game again, and we're just doing what we've always done before. Yeah, that looked good, but now I'm doing what I did before we even did that, is connecting them. Any tool that can connect them into the transfer is, as opposed to reminding them as them taking ownership, is so useful.
Yeah. I'm going to constrain myself to only using questions for the last 15, 20 minutes of this episode. So feel free to call me out on that if I start rambling. So a question for both of you. The CLA in elite performance environments. So Liam, you were national team coach last year, under 16 men. So not elite as an adult, but still coaching in the European Championships, the best players in Great Britain. How successful were you applying the CLA in that constrained environment, principles of play, etc.? So what was your experience there? And then, Mark, if you could then bounce off that, compare it to the performance environments you've been in. Go for it, Liam.
Yeah, principles of play for me are key. And I heard Jamie talking about it a lot on the previous episode. I think for me, those principles help to then guide everything that we're doing with small-sided games and the CLA. The two almost go hand in hand, playing a conceptual style of basketball and allowing players more autonomy to be able to self-explore within your environment. And that there's a lot of synergy there, and that's why I like the both. I think we had mixed outcomes with the U16s. We had a limited amount of prep. And so utilizing the CLA in that environment meant that we didn't waste any reps. We were always time on task, and we had a lot of opportunity to play a lot in that environment, which I think sped up how much we were able to teach. one of my reflections post the European champs was we probably should have still simplified it a little bit more, especially on the offensive end for the players, and gone deeper within some of the small-sided games and the concepts and ideas that we wanted to play out of, and I'll actually allow the players more time to become familiar with it rather than a breadth of topics that we covered. And then the other challenge that I think some coaches will always throw at it with the CLA is when you're in that environment, especially when you get to a European champs and you're playing 7 games in the space of 10, 11 days, that you have to be conscious of loading and players physically being able to still be in competitive small-sided games and then the next day be playing Portugal in the qualifying round of the tournament. And we did a lot in that space of constraining defense to play at 50%. We did a lot of menu of opportunities where we would ask the defense to show option A, B, or C to the offense so that the offense were still playing against some sort of external cue, the defender, but they had a decision to make that would replicate the decision that they would see in game. So if we knew going into, let's stay with Portugal as an example, if we knew that we were playing Portugal and when we were in the pick and roll, they would hard hedge, so an aggressive, disruptive coverage against our pick and roll, we would give the defense in our practice environments option A, option B, option C when you're in that hard hedge to show the offense so that the offense could come up with the solutions. Then the constraints that we would use within that are if you can't create advantage, what we would call dominoes, so you've knocked down the first dominoes, they continue to fall, that's what offense looks like for us, then it would be an immediate turnover. Or if you were to over dribble against it, so you had a free dribble limit, that would be a turnover. And that's how we would do some of our scout prep in the build up to some of the games. I think for me personally, if we could have had a little bit longer with the players, we probably would have saw more success there. In the same vein as the question that you guys were asking earlier as to, is there some resistance at first for those players coming into a national team environment? We had them for 5 weeks before we went to the tournament. It probably took a good couple of weeks before they bought into the process and why we were doing it. But I'm a big advocate for it in a short prep time. I think it really helped us to be more prepared than we could have been in years past.
For me to answer this, Simon, you need to give me 4 episodes to answer this. So in 5 to 7 minutes, the bandwidth is unbelievable. Huge from elite level. Where it's easier to build the confidence and competence in coaches to do it is in the Olympic and Paralympic team they work with, because there's time. Yes, they have major championships. They've got to get a level of success to keep going. Some of it's funding, but there is time to get them to build into this. When you get into leagues, whether that's football, rugby, basketball, those elite level teams, everything's about confidence and competence in the athlete. So if they're having 1-2 games a week, which they can in league and cup, it's the coach really getting to, well, hang on a minute, I'm seeing all of this in a match. What's the 1 or 2 things? And you may have one in transition, one in offense, one in defense. It could be as simple as that. That we say, if we improved in this, it will give us the edge and not just react to the next match because they have a certain style. That's where it becomes really tough for the coach to honor it and then share it in a way. It says, guys, we've got all these things, but here's what we've recognized. If we now improve in this one area in our defense, I think this will have an impact, not just in this next match, but in the next 3-4 weeks. So this is what we're going to do. And then get that clarity and then go into the gamification of it, etc. And getting the athletes to buy into, well, we're not doing all this stuff. You're not doing a new tactic. Hang on. We scout the next team, coach, and we always have this tactic of changing. No. Not going to do any of that. We're going to adapt live on what we see. We'll spot where the trends are, but we're not changing every single week to try and become a different team to play a different team. And you're fighting that because that's the tradition side. So I think it comes down to really simplifying it, getting the athletes to really connect with, okay, so we're just going to improve in this one area. Yes. Okay. And let's challenge ourselves, test it. and it's about building that confidence with the athletes. But the coach not getting caught up in the scoreline, not getting caught up in the media, not getting caught up in the owners, the fans, and just going calm. Okay, what's the one element that actually we may not see a result in a week, but we can see a result in 3 weeks, but I'm going to start investing in it now, even though I've got 3 matches in between that. That's the edge of the great coaches I've worked with, that they go, yeah, I can do that, and that's what I need to do. The rest, they're doing the best they can, but they're so caught up in analysing the match so much, they have too many tactical elements they work, so then they go into these unopposed drills, or they go into an opposed drill, but they're almost dictating where to stand and what to do. I'm making probably that too extreme, but there's a lot of coach guidance. It looks good, but I've never seen it transform it into the next match. And then there's more frustration, and then we go even more into, okay, we need to work on this. So the bandwidth is huge, but I would say the coaches that do it very well, they really get confidence from the athletes that when they share that discussion of where's our focus, they start to build that culture where the athletes recognize, okay, it's going to take 3-4 weeks to progress on this, but we really see the value in us becoming a better, more robust and resilient team when we do, and not, I need to react to the scoreline of the last match. Okay, so look, we've got 8-9 things we need to cover this week, which happens too often at elite level. I said it would be a 3-episode.
Yeah, you did well there, Mark. Did well. We'll come back. We'll circle back to that. Hey, Liam, can you double click on something for me? You were describing using constraints to match your scout. And that's somewhat similar to what I think I heard you say there, Mark, where a clever coach will connect the tactical, the what, to the how. So, Liam, can you give us more examples of analyzing your opponents, the scout, whether it be specifically this one game we have next, or generally in our league, and then choosing constraints that brings something out? I'm mumbling my words, and I said
no, it makes sense. I think that there's 2 parts to the answer. The first is, and I mentioned this earlier, having a conceptual style of play lends itself to then being able to use constraints for me within the small-sided games, because let's say we use triggers. We said they're triggers on the offensive end to create advantage. Teams will defend that differently depending on what you see. So by playing that way, as Marcus said, in the build up to that game, that week of practice, we will replicate the defense that we would see on that trigger within our small-sided games to find what we call a coverage solution. So if their coverage is that they're switching it defensively, our coverage solution might be X or Y. And so our small-sided games would value those coverage solutions. So we could strip it all the way back down to, if we know that anytime we play out of a dribble handoff, so anytime one player dribbles towards the other, hands it off, and we play out of that, teams are going to switch it in that situation. So what are our variable coverage solutions? What are the different coverage solutions that we can get to? Well, the ball handler, instead of handing it off, could keep the ball and look to turn the corner and attack the basket. Or they could look to pitch it quickly and slip out of it so that the defender doesn't have time to be able to switch. We would create that within a 2-on-2 in our small-sided game. And we would constrain that the defense must switch it every time, even if that's not our base defensive coverage, because that's what we're going to see from the other team. And we would use either the scoring system, or we would constrain perhaps the task or the performer. So maybe they only have 2 dribbles to be able to find that advantage. And that's how we would build in some of those small-sided games in the build-up to a game day within our scout. It allows us to be more adaptable based on who we're going to see, but our style of play and what we execute on a game-to-game basis, our principles of play, as Jamie was talking about, they don't change. That doesn't change. It's the solution to the problem that the other team is giving us that does change on a week-by-week basis. Because then by the time we get to the end of the season, especially in our league, we've probably seen every possible coverage that we could see in that season, that once we get to the end and we get to the playoffs, and hopefully we're there in a couple of weeks' time, that then the players are attuned to all of these different affordances that present themselves, because we've got a body of work from the season that has got us to that point. And that's how we would build it into our scout.
If I connect to, and Liam, please add if this connects to you, Mavericks and trends. So if we're looking and this is where I feel it's more difficult for age groups than it is for elite senior teams. Crazy, I know. So the trends are, there's only so many ways a team plays a game. There's no team that plays something totally different than anyone else. So once you work out the trends of how a team plays, that's pretty much it. Remember, they're watching you, so they're going to be looking at your trends. So there's not really that much difference. Where there is difference is in the Mavericks. So the Mavericks are those athletes that have a certain unique talent or capability far beyond that of the average player, far beyond that of the above average player. They are tough to play against, and that's where uniqueness come in. And where I say it's even more difficult for age groups because of the maturity differences. So you can have a 12-year-old that's literally 3 foot taller and stronger than the rest of the league. So all they do is he goes up attack. If it's football, as an example, they just kick the ball over the top. He heads it into the net, and you go, okay, well, we got the Maverick team. What are we going to do against it? Or don't give them the ball. Whatever it may be. But that's understanding is some things we can't control. There's some things are trends. But if there is a unique player, then we're just going, okay, well, let's just highlight it. We can't change our game because of one player. But we're just highlighting those unique Mavericks to go, let's be aware of them. What do they do? Okay. So do you remember Jonah Lummu, the All Blacks?
I've been in the same room as Jonah Lummu.
See, I thought that from the New Zealand side, Simon, I thought I'll pick a New Zealander. So
I walked past him. I walked past Jonah Lummu.
There you go. You walk past. So an example of, he came in. This is rugby union we're talking about. If you don't know of him, just please Google him if you don't follow rugby. So he came into the international and he was as big as the biggest guy, as strong as the biggest guy, but he was faster and agile as the wingers. So now they're starting to pass this, give them the ball, and he runs through people and scores. So one of the greatest ones, and it will be on YouTube, an example, and this way we connect to what we're talking about, is England went to play, and it was Will Carlin who was a captain at the time. And they go, right, we've got this guy. So they're talking in the dressing room, right, what do we need to do? Because of this Maverick. And they go, right, what we do, just don't give him 2 feet. If he gets 3 or 4 steps in, he's gone, we can't stop him. So they had people, as soon as he gets the ball, we'll have 2 or 3 people close him down really, really quick. That was their plan. Please go on YouTube and watch the video of that match highlights. And basically, you could see they were all trying to grab him. They couldn't get to him. All Blacks have worked it out. We'll just play the ball back fast on him so he can pick his speed up. And he was just walking and running over international England players as if they were 12-year-old children and scoring. So the reality is, and I think Will, after the match, Will Carlin, when I interviewed him, he said, look, I'm going to say this as a compliment, but the guy's a freak. We can't stop this guy. We're just like, don't give him the ball. So there will be those. And I think if we're going back to the point of this, when we're developing age groups, there will be some of those Mavericks because of age, maturity. But you as a coach, remember your role as a coach is, your role as a coach is to develop better players, better people, and get people enjoying engaging the game, many games for many years, and keep them in the sport. So don't get caught up in, okay, we've got this certain team we're playing against, we've got this certain Maverick, whatever it may be, or they're a higher capability team. Let's throw everything out. Let's come up with this tactic to try and beat this team, to compromise actually why are we here? What's the point of growing and developing, and keep things really simple to develop over weeks and months. I think that's more challenging for some of the age groups than some of the seniors.
Mark, I think that there's also a point in here about how the CLA can help coaches in those youth environments when they have those Mavericks on their own team. Because oftentimes you'll see players at 12, 13 years old that have just matured quicker than some of their peers and might be 6'3" in an environment where everybody else is 5'6".
Yeah.
And so they're able to get to certain affordances that everybody else in that environment can't do. This is where the CLA, for me, comes into its own, because you as a coach can constrain that individual performer. So whereas everybody else might have a free dribble limit to get to a finish at the rim, that player has a 1 dribble limit. And they have to now become more adaptable in that environment, and they're not able to just draw on the fact that they're half a foot taller than everybody else in that space. And I think you would typically see someone in that environment who, if they are an early maturer, when everybody else catches up, they kind of fall away a little bit. And for me, coaches still have responsibility to speed up the process for that player. And so the CLA in the youth environment, for me, comes into its own in that space, because you can create a small-sided game and you can be as creative as you want as a coach for the team. But within that, there can also be some constraints that are just based on a couple of individuals that might be finding it easier than everybody else, to still give them a challenge point that their development isn't affected because of everything else that you're doing in that environment. And that for me is a big reason why I will always have the CLA as my toolbox and as the kind of what does the bulk of the heavy lifting in my environment, because most of our players are 16 to 19 and they need that level of support there. And across the 25 players that we've got in our academy, 3 or 4 of them have played national teams. Everybody else is coming from various different levels.
Yeah.
So being able to constrain every practice, every activity, every performer just allows us so many more opportunities for player development and understanding.
And it's such a good point. We've hit both angles there, as if you're a coach and you see an opposition, one of those mavericks, is don't change everything for the sake of that. You've made a real critical point that if you have one of those, are you developing that player, or are you just exploiting their strength to win a game, but you're not actually developing that player? We see it a lot in rugby. You must see the highlights on Instagram where you got a little kid and they're giving the ball and he just shuffles through everybody and scores, but he's not learning to pass the ball. He's not learning to communicate with others. He's just stronger, faster, great mover. And you go, like, how fantastic is he? He keeps scoring, just giving the ball. But we're not really developing him, and we're not really developing the team by doing that. We're winning a game, you know.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example, Liam. Thank you for sharing that. That's a light bulb moment, I think, for listening to that for a lot of people. That leads us on to our top tips, because we constrained ourselves to an hour for this podcast. I said I could only ask questions, so I'm going to opt out of this because you guys have got a lot to say. So I'll let you go back and forth.
No, you can't do that, Simon. We need one from you. Come on.
Okay. Oh, okay, Mark. I'll
can't change the rules.
Yeah, I can't change the rules. Okay, fair enough. So these are our top tips. These are practical things. So if a coach can only listen to 5 minutes of this podcast, let it be this 5 minutes. Little things that they can do in their practices tomorrow to make the game, make the practice more representative of a game, and improve the learning and the development of the people they're coaching. All right, Liam, you're our guest. Can you kick us off?
Yeah, first one for me is within your practice design, decide whether your small-sided games are teaching, learning, or competing. And this is a Mike McKay-ism. So teaching means I can stop it at any point, and I can intervene in any of the ways that we've spoken about. Learning means I can only stop it at a natural dead point within the small-sided game, so they score or the ball goes out of bounds. Competing means I'm not stopping it at any point. And by categorizing your activities in your environment, that will help you to understand when to jump in and which ones you can offer more insight from that tool belt rather than the toolbox.
Brilliant, Liam. Good start. Go for it, Mark.
Well, that connects, if people have been listening to this, that learn it, performance, challenge it, the clarity of what is the success for this. Importantly, for that main point, if everyone's listening, a good point Liam's made is the athletes need to be aware of that. It's not just the coach, because that's the expectation. Key element for me is when we're working through this is understand that do not look for success in one session, and don't measure success in one session by an intervention. Give yourself 3-4 weeks or 6-7 sessions and engage the athletes in this next few weeks or this month. This is what we want to develop, improve on. So let's connect with this through the sessions. So there's that clarity of expectation from athletes and coaches on the time we need to put in for it to actually be effective in a game.
Great. My tip is really simple. Constrain space, particularly if you're playing a small-sided game. Play it in a particular space. It might be the corner of a pitch, or it might be starting from defense, or in basketball might be in the corner or at the top. Constrain the space, and then if you can get it to the next level, change that space in the middle of the activity. So stand on the court or the pitch with your arms out, and I have to do it small on the screen here, with your arms in different directions, and move around the pitch. You're actually changing. You're the corner of the playing area. You're changing the space mid-activity, and they have to adapt to that. Liam?
Don't be afraid of the mess. I think that's the big piece for me. Is at first it's going to look really messy, and if you film your practices, it's always great to go back and watch the small-sided games, because you have so much more room to be creative as a coach with small-sided games. But oftentimes you may leave a practice and feel like, we just didn't hit what I wanted to hit on that one. They weren't seeing or perceiving the affordances that I wanted them to. But if you go back and watch it, you as a coach might see different affordances that you hadn't thought of within your practice design. And so it's a great way to be able to review, and also to be able to look back and say, actually, it was messy, but the players were hitting the affordances and the outcomes that I wanted them to within that small-sided game that you might not have just seen in that moment, especially if using the CLA is something that's new to you.
Liam's shared a few. Make sure that you use every tool in the book that you have to help the athlete stay connected to integrating the very area of development we want them to focus on, whether that's using a scoring system, using a options system of what you can and can't do, connecting with it in your timeouts. Okay, review what did we say success was on the hot one-to-ones. So don't wait till the end of the session to do that, of how did we do in the session. Use that all the way through to help the athlete stay connected to what success is.
Great. I'm going to piggyback off something you said earlier, Liam. Coach turnovers. If there's a particular behavior or action you don't want the athletes to do, particularly if you've told them you don't want them to do it, but they still keep doing it, like in football or basketball, over dribbling, then just put in a constraint. You can only take X number of touches in football or Y number of dribbles in a game. And if that happens, the players know that's a turnover. Yell out turnover, put the ball on the ground, instantly continue. It doesn't go to the sideline. We don't break for 7 seconds and then go again. They just put the ball on the ground. Other team has it, and we just go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I love that one. We use that one in our environment all the time. Other one for me, I think you guys might have mentioned this before in a couple of episodes ago, but find and reach out to other coaches who are in a similar space to you, because utilizing the CLA in your environment, there is always something more that you can learn. There's always something more that you can try and understand. And I can almost guarantee, having been on this journey myself, there is someone who feels the same way you do about trying to understand a new methodology or a new approach. And so the more coaches that you can connect with that are in that space and that are working towards something similar, the more your own understanding will develop.
I'd say my last one, Simon. See, I said last one there. You'd be pleased.
Second to last, I'm sure.
Yeah. So check and challenge yourself as a coach. Connect to the lighthouse of your team, your club. Is if it's to develop the athletes and the players. Question: are you exploiting the player's strength to win a match without developing the other variables of that player, or are you looking at each player and go, okay, where do they need the development and not just to win this next match? I think that is a whole different shift on planning and integration of athlete development, and I'm talking primarily through age groups there.
That is a brilliant one, Mark. Thank you for sharing that, because that's a key founding principle of coaching, particularly young people. I love that. Okay. Any bonus tips you guys want to chuck in? Anything that you've been sitting on that you want to share?
Anyone listening to this, get on, put your comments underneath. What do you disagree with? Anything resonated with you? Any questions you have for any three of us, and Alan that's not here, but he always listens and connects on a WhatsApp. He will be back soon.
Yeah.
So the more you can give feedback to, we're cool with disagreements, we're cool with questions, we're cool of the resonation, we're cool of the light bulb of, oh, I'm going to do this next week and please let us know how it goes. The more feedback we can get, the more we can support everyone that listens.
Yeah, and I echo that. And thanks to you, Liam. Like we're just coaches trying to help other coaches. We're definitely not evangelical in anything that we advocate for. So to have a guest on who's can describe a change that they've been through and has got those strong opinions but lightly held, that's perfect for us. That's what we're all about. So thanks for entering into the spirit of the podcast. We really appreciate it. And as Mark said, coaches that are listening, get in touch. If you want to be a guest, get in touch. Or if you want to comment or ask a question, please do. So thanks, Liam.
Liam, do you want to be a shadow, or do you want to be contacted by people?
Oh, no, I'm more than happy for people to reach out. So Instagram or LinkedIn are probably the best two. So it's Coach Jefferson 11 on Instagram, and then just Liam Jefferson on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to find my profile. I've had some really rich conversations with coaches that have reached out from similar podcasts that I've done in the past, and I've learned something from them. So I'm more than happy to connect with anybody that wants to.
Does the 11 mean something, or were the first 10 taken?
No, it was my basketball jersey number when I played.
There
So I'm still holding on to the glory days a little bit. So I keep number 11 on the handle.
Okay, good to know.
Right. Thanks again, Liam.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys.